Welcome to another episode of Well-Adjusted Mama. This is a podcast dedicated to educating and empowering women from preconception, pregnancy, birth, and through early motherhood on wellness lifestyle. And I'm your host, Dr. Laura Brayton. I'm a pediatric maternity chiropractor and mother who has hand-selected experts in natural holistic healthcare specialties to shine light on options and choices during this exciting phase of a woman's life. Today, I had the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Patrick Porter on the topic of managing stress during and after pregnancy. Dr. Porter is an award-winning author, educator, researcher, entrepreneur, and speaker. He has a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Interdisciplinary Association of Functional Neurosciences and Rehabilitation, and he's also the Dean of Mind-Based Studies at the International Quantum University of Integrative Medicine. Sleep RX program voted Best Sleep Application of the Year by Health Magazine. He's been featured in the Wall Street Journal and Business Week, and a TV and radio personality for 10 years. He's created more than 1,200 personal development programs, successfully marketing more than 3 million products worldwide. And today we put a lot of focus on his newest brain training platform called BrainTap, which is distinctively designed to activate the brain's neuroplasticity, and is a modality that I'm using in my practice in Hoboken, New Jersey. And I've seen amazing results with this product. So I was so excited to be able to have Dr. Porter on as my guest today. Hi, Dr. Porter. Welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you on today.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so this is very exciting for my listeners to learn more about specifically ways they can empower themselves to manage stress, not only during pregnancy, but certainly as a mother as well. And this is a big deal because parenting is stressful. It's a lot of work to be a mom. So I'm always excited to share information and tidbits to listeners to help them learn not only why it's important to manage stress, but also like how they can do that. So talk to me about a little bit who you are and like why you're passionate about managing stress.
Well, my background is a psychologist. And actually, when I was with the Arizona Health Council, I used to work with teenage pregnancies and helping them get through their pregnancy. And sometimes they were as young as 12 years old and they were wanting to carry their baby through the full delivery. And we were able to teach them to de-stress. And that was one of the ways it started. When the mothers come back and say, how come she's telling jokes between contractions? It's because really your brain is so powerful, it can actually manage pain and discomfort. I went through painless surgery, so I use that same technique to help them with childbirth. But since then, I went on to invent a piece of technology called BrainTap, and we're working with right now, it's just over 2,600 clinics using it in their clinics as a way to teach people how to de-stress using technology, where most people would do it maybe through yoga, tai chi, meditation, or something like that. We teach people how to de-stress. And I've invented the first piece of this technology in the 80s. So I've been doing this for a long time. And the newest technology is what we have now called BrainTap.
Yeah, so I actually have a BrainTap in my chiropractic practice here in Hoboken, New Jersey. We just got it a few months ago, and it's been a huge hit. And we use it not only with women that are pregnant, preparing for childbirth, but certainly a big audience has been after birth and they're sleep deprived. What we tell people is that 20-minute session is about equivalent to 4 hours of sleep. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah. What we're doing is we're compressing and that sleep down into a 20-minute sleep cycle. So you're actually getting right to those brain waves that are telling the body how to produce those neurotransmitters, which are going to help with the stress reduction and basically coping skills that they will need to get back on, whether it be a proper sleep schedule or just handling stress better.
Right. And certainly, anybody who's a newborn is going to just have some sleep deprivation. So any way we can help support the body in healing and functioning this is like accelerated, who can't, commit to 20 minutes, right, for their self-help and self-care. So I love that. And, you can purchase these units as well and do them at home. I know they're great at bedtime for people that are having challenges with sleep. But there's a lot. There's an empowerment. There's ones for anxiety, PTSD. I mean, your library is huge.
Yeah, we have one for helping if they're having trouble lactating. Even we have sessions for the the postpartum menopause. We have them for menopause, I'm just going to say, and postpartum. We also have 10-minute sessions. So if somebody doesn't have time, we did a study with mothers of autistic children. And of course, we did a test showing that they had PTSD because of the stress that they're under, and they didn't have 20 minutes. So we had them listen to our, what we call digital coffee. It's 10 minutes. It's a reboot session. It gives you energy. And for some people, that's all they need to get them over that hump when they're not sleeping well, especially if you have a newborn. If you go back to bed, you could listen to one of our Delta sessions, which will put you back into a deep sleep state, and you could catch back up with your sleep in 20 minutes or 30 minutes.
Wow, that's amazing that the technology can literally, like, you're are you rewiring the brain, or you're just helping with the brain waves?
Yeah, it's called neuroplasticity. And what we're doing is we're actually giving energy to the brain. A lot of people don't realize it, but to sleep, we need energy. But the problem is that most people have the inappropriate energy. That is why they can't sleep. They have the stress, the fear, the anxiety. That kind of energy is not going to calm you down. We need to teach the brain. And there's some breathing techniques maybe we can teach some of the mothers or the newborns, the ones that have newborns, just so they can do it even without the BrainTap. There are some techniques that I can share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you want to do that right now?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. There's two different techniques that I tell people. One is right before sleep, when you're laying in bed and you're trying to unwind. Think of your body like a battery that's filled up with all this energy. And at night, you want to move that energy out of the nervous system so you can reach the deeper levels of sleep. And you can do this by this simple breath technique. So you breathe into the mental count of 4. This triggers your sympathetic system. That's your fight or flight. And then you breathe out to the mental count of 8. And that's going to trigger your parasympathetic, your rest, digest, and recovery. Eventually, what you'll find is you'll do it maybe for not even 2 minutes, and the body is going to be super relaxed. And then you can go to the next level of this, which is to visualize the different parts of the body unwinding, like if you feel some tension in your feet or your calves or your shoulders, you can move through the body. We call it body scanning. And while you're doing the breath. And then what will happen eventually is you're going to be in that deep state of sleep. And if you're still awake at that point, which 90% of the people aren't going to be, then what I recommend is you start thinking of the things you're grateful for, because that they call it vitamin G now, because they know that when you have these grateful, loving thoughts, your brain creates the right neurotransmitters like GABA and acetylcholine that help you to move into that deeper state of sleep and get the rest and recovery you need. And then the other breath in the morning, there's a breath that they call the breath of fire, and it's a little more difficult, but it's going to bring you a lot of energy. You just sit on the edge of your chair, and you're only concentrating on the out breath, but you're going to close your mouth and you're going to breathe through your nose, and it's just out as quickly as you can and as rapidly as you can. And I always tell people to start off maybe only doing 2 or 3 of them because you can get a little lightheaded, but try to build up to 5 reps, which is basically and if you look it up on YouTube, you can just look up the breath of fire. Like in the morning when you need that energy, but you don't have time to go get your coffee, you can even do this while you're changing your baby. I mean, once you get this breath down, what it is your body needs oxygen. So we're going to quickly deliver oxygen to the brain, which is going to energize the whole system. 70% of the nervous system is between our ears. So we need to get our brain going to get the rest of our nervous system engaged.
Wow, that's amazing. And it is powerful how breath can really shift that. I mean, I know for me with this pandemic, I've been so challenged having to wear a mask while I'm working because that does not help the oxygenation of my brain.
No. In fact, they showed that children are 25% reduction in their ability to concentrate and focus and think. So scores are all down. And what's the most bizarre part is it doesn't do anything for you. So, I mean, there's no protection with the mask other than protection against the spit, I guess, if somebody was to, but there's no, I mean, I heard somebody describe it as trying to keep mosquitoes out of your backyard with a picket fence. It's not going to work. But I mean, I don't know what the reasoning is behind it now, but definitely people train that way because they want to imitate oxygen at high altitudes, and that's not good for our bodies. I mean, we need oxygen as much as possible. So definitely start breathing again and doing it. And even when you're laying down with your child, if you start doing these deep breathing, your child will actually mimic it without knowing it, because our physiology matches other people. Like we when we have good friends and we're with them, you'll notice you start having the same mannerisms, you start breathing in the same cadence, because we're sharing, kind of the energy with each other, being there in their presence.
Totally. And I think with really young children, like babies, they automatically belly breathe, right? And then somehow we forget how to belly breathe, right? And we go into that more sympathetic stress breathing using our shoulders and our chest as opposed to our diaphragm. And that's going to lessen our oxygen as well.
Yeah. The other thing that you need to really start doing while pregnant and then after is to make sure you're drinking half your body's weight in ounces of water, because hydration, because especially when you're stressed out, you're going to be using up more resources. And there's a book called Your Body's Many Cries for Water. And just by drinking good water, and I'm talking about like some kind of purified water or something that's not just out of the tap, but something that's healthy, your body, you'll find that you will have more energy, you'll have more focus and concentration, and everything seems to work better, especially in the morning, because when we sleep, our brain can shrink 3/4 of an inch, and it's doing that to detoxify. So once you do that, the body needs to clear that out.
Totally. Water is a powerful detoxifier, and it's how we move the toxins out of our body. And I think that is one of the best things you can do first thing in the morning when you wake up is just drink a large glass of water, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how, why stress is so, I mean, we know stress isn't good for us in general, right, but how does it specifically impact women when they're pregnant and after giving birth?
Well, the main thing is that they've now shown evidence that whatever the mother's feeling, the child's feeling. So it's not like they're separated, those emotions, because emotions have a chemical corresponding reaction. So in the one we're talking about most here is cortisol and other stress hormones. Those stress hormones can actually shrink the mother's brain, but now they're showing that stress can actually cause the child to not thrive as well, because they're under that same environment. They're in the environment of the stress. So it's going to have a definite effect chemically on the body. Physiologically, it's going to burn out because the brain loves patterns. So even though it's not a healthy pattern, it's a pattern. And the brain goes, well, this is the way, you get up every morning, you have this clenched jaw and maybe you're stressed. And when it's not there, it becomes uncomfortable. So it might take a little bit to break that pattern, because as bizarre as it sounds, people become addicted to their stress. There are some people, life's going really well and they'll figure out how to become stressed about it. So a lot of it is learning how to let go and go with the flow. But the physically, everything, when blood flow is restricted, it's not going to help. Like when we have the stress-free childbirth program with BrainTap, the whole thing is about teaching people that they can control their physiology. We can control our psychology. We can control what thoughts we think. We control the way our body feels, but we have to train it. You can't wait to the last minute and then, you're ready to deliver and wonder why you're stressed out. You have to plan that to be de-stressed so the body can function the way it was intended. A woman's body is designed to birth children, as long as it's relaxed and comfortable and everything is healthy about the child and the mother. And so, but when you're stressed out, we know this can cause big problems with, or they're going to have to, which is not as healthy as to have a cesarean. I mean, there's a lot of evidence out there that shows cesarean births are causing a lot of problems because the baby doesn't go through that thriving cycle through the birth canal. So there's something called primitive reflexes that don't get triggered. So, but when you're relaxed, the body opens up and does what it's supposed to do. For most people, they still will feel a little discomfort, but I mean, I've had more than 60% of the people that we've worked with have no pain. So there's a good chance that you can, and this is because pain only happens in the brain. As bizarre as that sounds, a lot of people look at me like, what do you mean? There's no pain in the body. That's why they can put you out. And the best example I can give you is somebody who has neuropathy in their feet, and they don't realize that there's always a story of the guy who bumps his toes and gets cuts and he doesn't feel anything. That's because there's no nerves there. So when you turn off the response from the brain, there's no pain in the foot. The pain's all happening in the brain. So once the brain gets on board with teaching you how to relax, then the body can become more flexible, more pliable, more relaxed, and it functions better. Every Olympic athlete or pro athlete will tell you as well that the body performs better in a de-stressed state. So especially when we're thinking about just everyday life or giving birth, we need to learn to relax and go through some breathing processes, which is mostly taught in most breathwork classes for pregnancy. They will teach you some form of connected breath.
Yeah, I mean, and this is powerful stuff to practice during pregnancy. You're not going to learn this new skill when you're in labor. That's too late. So typically with your program, how many weeks pregnant would a woman start listening to prepare for childbirth?
We like them to start around the 6th month.
Okay.
They can start earlier if they want. I most of the time, though, they'll just listen to the stress reduction because pretty much you're doing most everything normal up to 5 to 6 months. So whenever you start to feel that, or if your brain starts to ponder on the negative, the fear that happens, especially for new mothers, that don't know, that's why one of the most popular books is What to Expect When You're Expecting, right? Because most people don't know what to expect. They just hear stories. So, but when you start to plan, there's a saying that what you visualize, you realize. So when we talk about using the techniques, we're talking about planning the most relaxing, healthy program that's going to happen. And once the brain locks into that and realizes that you won't need as much, if you do take some kind of pain medicine during the pregnancy, you won't have to take as much, or you won't feel it as much. I mean, we teach people how to do painless dentistry just as well. The same techniques work for that. So once you learn to turn the brain off, and it's really the stress hormones are what trigger the pain cycle. The more stressed you are, unfortunately, it's almost like an amplifier. It amplifies the pain or discomfort in the body.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And the computer, of our body is our brain and our nervous system, right? So that's when we can manage that. That's powerful. I think a lot of people don't necessarily feel like they have the ability to control their thoughts or don't even know that's maybe possible for them.
Right. Well, they say that we think we have about 80,000 thoughts a day. And unfortunately, over 80% of them are negative because this is the way we were wired. I mean, think about it. Our brain, a part of our brain called the reticular activating system, is there to protect us. So basically, we're always on guard. Even though we've evolved, we have the internet, we have automobiles, we do all of these things. Our bodies are still the same bodies that were there in the Serengeti, 200,000 years ago. There's not been a lot of evolution with our body. In fact, there's been no evolution. That's why people are saying we didn't evolve. What's going on? Our bodies aren't really. We've never had that quantum leap in like what took us from being ape to human. That's why they can't figure it out because these bodies don't evolve that way. But we do express. There's something called epigenetics. And that means that what's happening around us and through us internally is actually turning our gene expression on and off, which means how we perform. If you think about childbirth like a performance, that the body has to perform like a pro athlete would have to perform. Yeah, a marathon or something like that. So you're getting your body in shape to have this intense, experience. And the whole thing is that if you plan it as a challenge instead of a threat, when you look at that experience as a threat to the body, that heightens the stress and the cortisol and all the other stress hormones that trigger fear in the body and restrict the body. But when you start looking at it as a challenge, like, hey, I can do this, I can breathe through it. I mean, pain is pressure, and different things like that, because we're turning on and off those thought switches that we've been programmed with by mom and dad, brothers and sisters, and everybody else who ever talked to us about having a birth. All those, and of course, from the outside, it might even be far worse than the explanation of it than somebody who had a good childbirthing experience would tell you. I mean, obviously the stories are vast in the negative, so that's what you're fighting. But there are a lot of easy births too. I mean, my mother had 9 children and none of them lasted more than an hour, so she was very lucky. But we were all born really small. We were all under 7 pounds. So, that
helps.
I think that kind of helped her, so, but and it's all about what you're expecting. Because what you expect, you tend to realize. So we need to change. They call it reframing in psychology. So we need to reframe that experience from a threat to a challenge. And then once you realize, if you understand that you have the skill set to face the challenge, that's very different than having a challenge that's unsurmountable. Like you talked about what was just happening over the last 2 years. I mean, the biggest problem with that whole experience and why so many suicides and all the depression was there was no end in sight. There was no hope. I mean, nobody was giving any positives about it. All we heard about was the negatives. So the brain doesn't like that. The brain likes to know there's an outcome. It likes to know there's choices. And what I like to tell, especially expecting mothers, is you do have a choice. And of course, there's going to be trauma because the body is going to go through trauma to have the baby. So how do we reprocess that trauma? It's almost like PTSD, but in a good way. If you had depending upon what you're expecting, most mothers that have more than one child don't remember all the negatives because they say if they'd remembered them all, they would not have another child. But because they know the joy of having the child and were so looking forward to it and all of that, you kind of overcome the discomfort that happens and the pain that can be realized or not realized. So I think that it's all about changing the mindset. And that's why if you start at the 5th or 6th month, you have plenty of time. And, I would recommend exercising also, whatever your doctor would say would be good, but
the physical component.
Yeah. Like my wife, she swam every day, even the day before she gave birth. And nobody could believe after she had the baby that she ever was carrying a baby, because she stayed in good shape, and Alex is 6'5" now. So it didn't hurt him. He didn't stunt his growth. Like back when we were having children, they thought exercise when you were pregnant would stunt the growth of the child. That's not true at all, because also whatever you're doing physically, it's not just what you drink and eat that the baby also shares with you. It's all the emotions, it's all the activities, it's everything that's going on. That baby is processing all that. In fact, there's a lot of therapy that we do when we have people go back to their trauma. A lot of the trauma that started for people when they're born actually started while they were gestating. Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
I've had people remember conversations with their parents and tell their parents who are still alive, and they go, "How did you know that?" Well, they record everything. Those children are recording everything. The brain, we talked about neuroplasticity earlier. When you were younger, our brain is like a sponge absorbing every piece of information. It can't discern what that information is, but it stores it all, categorizes it. And then as we grow and develop, we start to organize that data. And that's why, we start to, in fact, that's why even children that learn 2 languages, which I always recommend, because then you have a brain circuit that never shuts down and you can learn other things better and faster, because that's one of the most difficult things to learn. And people that learn 2 languages before 7 keep that brain circuit going. And the same thing's true with all the other brain circuits. We need to keep that childlike mind, if you will, going so we can learn and develop. And I think that's very important for the mothers, to not just for the children, but the mother to have that childlike mind that says, what can I learn about this? How can I make this a more enjoyable experience? Not that everything's not negative and everything's not all positive, but if we can focus on those positive experiences and the joy of the experience, it's going to be much better than the other way around.
I totally agree with that. And I really, a big part of my podcast is talking to pregnant women about really having boundaries around the negative news, negative people, and especially negative birth stories. Like that is not the time. Nobody needs to be venting. You're not their therapist if they need to complain about their birth experience, right? You are in this sacred place. You're creating this baby and you're literally creating your belief system about what this upcoming birth is going to look like, right? So we want to fill that subconscious mind with positive stories and the belief that your belief system that your body has the ability to have this amazing birth experience, right? That's possible for you. So that's really important. And I think it's like a lot of times women don't recognize that that's how impactful that is, right? When we just keep hearing negative, it could be negative birth stories, or it could just be turning the news on, right? And having this like bombardment of stress, and how that's also going to like weigh us down.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, anything that happens to you happens through you. So, and everything that happens through you happens to you. So you have to think about the cycle. When you see an image outside of yourself, you're not seeing it outside yourself. It's in your brain, you're processing it. So neurophysiology would tell you that, when you see somebody, like you're walking through the mall and you see a friend that you haven't seen in a while and you're really looking forward to meeting her, the closer you get, the more you smile, the more giddy you feel. Basically, that's those neurochemicals I'm talking about. The opposite is also true. If you see somebody in the mall you don't really want to see, maybe you had a blowout with them 4 years earlier, you're going to ditch into a store and let them walk by, and it's going to cause a reaction. So I always tell people the world, unfortunately, is like a graphic user interface on a computer, and every person and everything can be an icon for a program. And any of those programs that take you out of the good zone, the happy, healthy zone, you need to work on, because we should never give away our remote control to somebody else. The way we
like
feel.
A trigger, right? That we're getting triggered.
Right,
and that's exactly. An opportunity to like look a little deeper, like, why is this triggering me? What's going on here?
Right. And it could be as simple as the ones you'll learn in Psychology 101 is when little Jimmy touches the hot stove and it's a black pan or a white pan or silver, whatever it is. And then that color becomes hated by little Jimmy. He doesn't know why he hates that color, just doesn't like it. But it was because he touched that pan as a child, and all he knew was that color. And then, so I tell people,
memory is associated with that color.
Yes. Yeah. I tell people, think of your past like leftovers. And if you keep them long enough in the refrigerator, they go bad. You pull them out, they're green and fuzzy. You don't have to send them away to CSI and that to find out who was eating with you. And did your parents make that meal well? You just throw that away. You don't even need to deal with it. That's not the way the brain works. In fact, that's why, unfortunately, my profession, which is psychology, has never had a study better than 12%, and that's terrible. The placebo is over 40%. So that means they're talking themselves out of the change. So really stay focused on the positive. When you're telling people to focus on the positive outcomes and be the constructive and get rid of, what I tell them is get rid of the poison people. You don't need any energy vampires in your life during that time.
Yes.
It's really sacred space when you're birthing a child and even carrying the child, because that child is hearing everything. It's not like it's not there. It's not something that's innate. It's, it is innate. It has an intelligence, but it's not like inert, I should say. It's not just this hunk of flesh in your stomach until it's born. It actually is thinking, acting, responding. It's a real being. And, even though we can't understand it, but we do know through psychology that, like I said, people are going back and remembering things that the parents are going, there's no way, you weren't born yet when that happened, but they have full memories of it because they were there.
They were there. And I would say even the same is true to once the baby is born. It's almost like sometimes as parents, we forget that even though the child's not able to speak and communicate with us that way, they are still hearing everything around them. And parenting does start in utero.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, one thing most people don't know now, but is now true science, is that we do this, infrared cameras where you can see people in the dark, right? That works because every person on Earth emits 800 to 860 nanometer light. You are emitting light, and that light has information. So when whoever you're around in proximity to, you are sharing their light and their information. That's why the mother relationship with the child is so strong. You have an inner light connection. At the mitochondrial level, we're talking about at the cellular level, the body knows, and there is a relationship there that goes beyond what physical science is telling us. They've done studies, and this was done with plants. So imagine if it's done with plants, it could be done with people. They took a plant in the forest, they hooked up a electroencephalograph to it and showed that basically can measure brainwaves or activity, electrical brainwaves. And they took the plant back to the lab. And when they tortured the plant in the lab, the tree registered it in the forest.
Wow.
So there is a connection. So when somebody says, what would you do for your son or daughter? Why is that family tie so strong? It's because we're literally connected at a physiological level. It's not just a psychological, a placebo controlled program. It's actual real information. And we're learning more and more about this quantum field and how it works, but we don't know there's quantum entanglement with mom, dad, brothers, and sisters. There are people that have been adopted. Their parents have no, I'll just use this as an example because it came up in one of my therapy sessions. Their family was totally against guns. There was no way they were going to have any guns, but their adopted son just was obsessed with guns and guns and guns. And they found out that the father, the birth father of the adopted child, was actually one of these guides in the woods that would take people hunting. And, so he was really into his guns. And so somehow the child still remembered that, even though the upbringing. Now, what Bruce Lipton says in his book, Biology of Belief, is that our genetics only account for 20% of our experience. So 80% is by our, who we're around, what we're doing, instead of who birthed us. I mean, who gave us our genes. But those things are flexible to happen. But I'm just saying that we're sharing that information. That's why it's so important that sometimes you just have to either re-educate your friends or upgrade your friends. Because in my book, Awaken the Genius, I talk about the crab syndrome. This is a process in psychology when you have friends that as soon as you get out of the bucket, they want to pull you back in, because when you're crabbing in the Chesapeake Bay, if you only have one crab in the bucket, you got to keep a cover over it. But as soon as you have two in the bucket, you don't have to anymore, because they'll keep themselves in the bucket, because they'll keep pulling the other one down. And that's why they call it the crab syndrome. So if we have any friends that are bringing us down, you should feel better when you're with your friends. I mean, I can think of 10 friends I have that when I'm with them and I leave, I feel energized, and you should feel that way about all your relationships.
Totally. So this actually makes me think of something else. What if the crab is a family member? What if it's like your mother-in-law or your mother, and they're really excited about becoming a grandma, right? And they want to be involved, but they're a little bit negative Nancy. How do you manage those relationships where you can't necessarily cut them out,
right,
but you need to have boundaries?
Right. You have to do it immediately, as fast as possible. Because the longer you let it go on, that means you're giving it. If you don't say something, it's okay. That's the whole thing about anything in life. If you're willing to let it slide, you're saying yes to it. So
not saying anything is actually saying yes instead of.
That's right.
No.
I've said that to some family members. Of course, I'm known as Dr. Positive. So say, we don't want that negative thinking here. And they go, well, they're not going to get the realistic view of the world. I go, yes, they will. I would rather wake up being happy and positive and hopeful today, rather than waking up and being disappointed every once in a while, than being disappointed 24/7. There are people that they go, well, and I was brought up Catholic, so it took me a while to breed that out of me, because when you go to Catholic school, you're threatened from the time you get to school to the time you leave. And so you got to kind of reprogram yourself to be a more positive person.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. So whether it's your religious upbringing or even the way your parents raised you, there's as you're preparing to become a mother, there's an opportunity to do things differently. But, we know the subconscious mind's formed like the first 7 years of our life, right? So let's say a woman is now pregnant with her first child and was surrounded by negative people as a child. How does she get rid of, like you said, get the garbage out of the refrigerator and throw it away? How does she do that? That's easier said than done sometimes, right?
Well, the first step is really about creating some forgiveness, mostly forgiving yourself for ever putting up with it, and
or as a child, did you have a choice?
Yeah, you might not. But the problem is they internalize it. We internalize a lot of blame gets put on ourselves. So that's what I'm saying is working on that forgiveness. The other is to start a gratitude journal. Start thinking about what's positive. I even have people create a imagination journal. Like, what would you want to have happen? Because their life is so bad, they can't even see any good things happening, and that's all about sorting out our futures. So if somebody looks at the future and says, oh, it's all bad, this blah, 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 well, that's possible. That's one possible future, but it's also possible that everything can work itself out. We can get better. But the reality is, whatever it is, you can choose to be happy about it, or you can choose to be sad about it. I always heard there's two roads to enlightenment. There's one you can laugh your way or you can cry your way. You get to choose, so I would choose laughing over crying all day long. But some people, the end result, we've all had those experiences where we've been so angry, upset that you cry. And then when you're done, it's like, oh, I got that out of my system, So either way, it's going to happen. We've also had it happen where you had a really good time, fun experience, and you forget about that negative stuff that's going on. So that's why if you can just figure out how to do more, and there are people that they just have a propensity to being negative, and so I would have a talk with them, and just ask them, what do we need to do to retrain the way you think about communicating with my family? Because it's really important to us that we stay positive and we stay healthy.
Yeah, gift them a BrainTap, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there you
go. Because it is possible, and I think, it's very interesting. I think about like my grandparents. They were like Nazi slave survivors in World War II and had really horrific experiences. And they were really kind of stuck in the survival, right? The survival mode. And that impacted my mother's development. And it's like, wow, how can I don't have to be stuck in that, right? I thank God I didn't have that same life experience. And, I don't have the same types of fears, and I don't have to, but it's very interesting as we learn about our families, how that impacts us as we start our own families, right? I think it's really important to examine those relationships and the generational impact.
Yeah, I tell people that it's like any other toxic thing that's happening. When you want to get rid of toxins, you go on a fast. You might have to do some fasting with them, and there's something in psychology they call stroking, which means you give energy to what you want. So there's negative strokes and positive strokes. So with those family members, I would really encourage, if they're going to do something right, because even a broken clock's right twice a day. So you can, they're going to do something, really encourage more of that behavior, and they'll do it as well. They won't realize it. And then when they say something negative, if you can get actively involved in reframing it, which means...
Can you give me an example of that? That sounds great.
Well, like one of the things they might say, well, they're sleeping well now, but they're going to eventually not sleep so much. They're going to keep you up all night. It's like, why did you have to share that with me? I'm basking in this great experience. They're sleeping through the night, So the reframe would be, that is possible, but it's also possible that they've learned to sleep so well that they'll sleep like this. They'll just continue to have great sleep patterns.
Right.
There's always the option, and so you just start reframing. Reframing means just come up with whatever the opposite is in a positive, and look at life as a series of challenges instead of threats. And a lot of people just think it's, like you said, they feel like it's their right, or when somebody's having a baby, it's their time to share their trauma and how terrible it was for them. And usually when it was a good birth, nobody says anything because they feel guilty. Oh, mine was so easy. I can't say anything because everybody else, it's almost like there's a saying in AA, the first liar doesn't have a chance. So that means when they stand up and give their story, it's like one person's story is better than next, because they feel like they have to top the next person's story and top the next. And it's like, that doesn't even matter, because that's not going to help the situation. So, and that's one of the questions I always ask. And if somebody's negative, I go, that's interesting. How's that helping the situation? And they'll go, oh, it's not. I just thought I would give my opinion. And I might say, opinions are like noses. Everybody has one, but you don't need to share it. And, some people are what we call auditory orators, which means that they can't think without speaking out loud. This is the family member you don't want to have around when you're trying to impress somebody. They seem to, whatever comes into their brain just comes out of their mouth there's no filter there. In fact, there's a lot of songs. I just heard a song on the radio about that, or when my grandkids were over, and there's some song on there that she doesn't have a filter. I'm going, yeah, that sounds like your Aunt Cherie. So that's the way. And some people, they know that. If you know them and they do that, people just say, oh, that's just Cherie, or that's just Bob, or whatever. But if they don't know them, they're going, what's wrong with that person? It's the way they think. They can't think without doing that. It's unfortunate, but there are people that's the way they think.
They can't retrain their brain.
Well, they could, but they're not willing to because it's easiest.
Right.
Especially
it would take work. It would take work to change.
Yeah. They don't know that they can talk internally. They have to speak out loud. Like some people actually say, I'm just thinking out loud, but they do it all the time because they don't know how to think without actually verbalizing what they have in their head.
Sometimes I talk to myself, but usually that's in private.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, man. I mean, I think this is so exciting. I really also loved how you talked about viewing childbirth as a challenge as opposed to a threat. And then you took it and expanded it. This could be any life experience, could be viewed this way. I love that idea because there's an excitement, there's a motivation, there's plan of action. How can I prepare for success here? When it comes to childbirth, how can I create a team and support all of this, right?
I know a lot of successful people that will not even hire somebody. They don't do this legally, but they won't hire somebody unless they've had a child because they realize that that's like a superpower. And if they look at it like that, any challenging situation, once you overcome it, you have a superpower now. You've done something that other people only read about or think about, and you've done it. So, and once you have your superpower, doesn't mean you don't have kryptonite out there somewhere, but it means now you have the ability or the capacity to overcome that. So if you can take, like in my book, with my dad, I said, I have a chapter how I was blessed to be the son of an alcoholic, because obviously that's not a pleasant thing, but because he taught me through that experience that I could choose to be an alcoholic or not. Being Roman Irish Catholic, we're not supposed to be sober after 6 p.m. That's against the rules, but you can change, right? It doesn't have to be the way that everybody else says it is. And so I always like to tell people, whatever's happening to you is you're in an incubator for your superpower. Once you overcome that, whether it's stress, anxiety, fear, childbirth, whatever it is, once you overcome that and you're looking at it from the past perspective, and you can say, wow, I did that. That should be empowering at that moment, and say, wow, if I did that, what else can I do? There's a story of a woman in Florida that a friend of mine with Jack Canfield, they went down to interview her. She picked up a car off her grandson, and they couldn't get an interview with her for over 2 months. And they finally did. And they said, what's going on? You should be so proud of yourself. She says, I'm embarrassed. And they go, why? You're embarrassed? What do you mean? She said, I picked that car off my grandchild, and I'm 93 years old. And they said, that's incredible. She goes, no, you don't understand. What else could I have accomplished in my life if I knew I was that capable? So that's what people need to understand about these challenges. Once you overcome them, you have a superpower. Use it. Embrace it, and now you can go off and do other great things because you've trained yourself to look at these situations differently.
Oh man, this is so exciting. And I want to share, I had a beautiful water birth at home 4 years ago with my son. And after that birth, I literally felt like I climbed a mountain and was like top of the world. I was like, I could do this every day. This is the best feeling ever. And you don't necessarily hear a lot of women who've given birth say, I want to give birth every day, right?
Right.
So it's and I don't want to have a traumatic birth every day, but that wasn't my experience. So
right.
It is, I just think, women listening, like this is what's possible for you. And, it really boils down to having your mind and your body just really strong, right? That's where this comes in, and you can create whatever you want to create.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, it's all perception, not reality. So our body will perform greater than we've thought possible. And our minds can conceive things that we've never even believed before. We just have to get outside of our own pre-programming and start thinking of the world differently, that we do have these superpowers, that we are born to do these things. These are not like having birth. I mean, the Indians used to walk across the plains, and if the mother had to give birth, she had to catch up. It wasn't like they stopped and had a big production, because they knew the cycles of life. They knew what was going on. They were in tune with their environment, all the other things that were going on. Not that they didn't have traumatic births, because back then that was the reason the life expectancy wasn't as high as it should be, but not among the Indians. They had a different philosophy to birth than the white man that came to America. So there's a big difference there.
Right. Wow. So are there any last thoughts you want to share with our audience?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that just think about this. You have the world's greatest pharmacy between your ears. It's ran by the most powerful computer in the galaxy. It knows exactly what to do, but you have to focus on the end result of your actions. What is the end result you want? Picture it in your mind, in color, with sound, with experience. Imagine the celebration, like you said, when you're at the top of the mountain and you're cheering and you're saying, I could do this every day. Well, you don't have to birth a child every day, but what if you could birth new ideas, new concepts, new activities? What if you could take that concept and say, wow, today I'm going to birth a new me. I'm going to show up as the most powerful, positive person I could ever be. And every day you start thinking that way. That's what I'm talking about, like as a metaphor, that whatever you go through, you can use that to empower yourself onto greater journeys. And anybody's brain can be improved at any age. I mean, we've done tests with our neurocheck technology with 100-year-old people, and they were still able to improve their brain function in 6 weeks. And, so these brains are not subject to the laws of time that we've been told about. They are if you're toxic and you're stressed out and you don't eat well and you don't sleep well. Sleep well is probably one of the biggest things, and during pregnancy, I know people have problems with that. That's where the BrainTap comes in and can help them to shift gears, listen to the Deep Delta series and go into that state. And I jokingly tell people, I know that my daughter was listening because I read to her every night, because I heard that if you read to them, they're smarter. She could read a book. She worked at Barnes & Noble, so at her break, she could read 2 books. She would read 3 to 4 books a day when she worked there, and then she'd buy one. I go, why are you buying it? You read it, like that night. She loves to read. That's just her, and I was fortunate. If she was going to get in trouble, she was at Barnes & Noble or some art the library reading books for free, because that's what she did. But I think that we start those behaviors with them early on. So, treat them like they're there immediately. And talk to them as if they're there, and, share the love and the experience, and it'll come back 100-fold.
That's beautiful. Dr. Porter, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It was great being here.
Well, I had a lot of fun interviewing Dr. Porter today. He was, with his experience as a TV and radio personality, it was very easy to have a very natural, organic conversation. And it's a topic that he's so passionate about, of not just managing stress, but especially for perinatal women and the impacts not only on the mother, but also on the baby as well. It's a topic that I'm also equally passionate about. So I hope you enjoyed it. And I also want to share that I'm so thrilled to announce that Well-Adjusted Mama is going to be featured in the award-winning app called Good Pods on May 20th, 2022 as a featured podcast in honor of Mother's Day in the month of May. So if you haven't already, download Good Pods app and subscribe to Well-Adjusted Mama, and click on the link for creator to follow me, Dr. Laura Brayton, so we can share the different podcast episodes beyond Well-Adjusted Mama that we're listening to and finding value and spreading the good word of podcasting.